All right, mics are live and counting us down. 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 1, 2. Check. All right, we're live. You ready, Mike?
Go ahead.
All right, we're back for another episode of the Hip Politics podcast. What's up, Hip Politics?
This is number 24, right?
This is number actually 25 because I got that. You know, we have that.
Plus
Yeah,
2.
Michael Jordan plus 2 because I got that hidden episode.
What we talking about is number 23.
Oh, that's right. You're a New Yorker. Yeah.
Right, right.
That's right.
We're going to get to our guests in just a second, but welcome. You have your co-host here, Mr. Cameron Trimble, a.k.a. Mr. Cameron Calvin, a.k.a. Mr. Hip Politics, a.k.a. Mr. 216 to the 202, a.k.a. Cam the Connector. And then I'm sitting across to my farthest left is my co-host. Co-pilot. He's feeling a little weird today because we're in his place of business in the office, right. And we're talking to his boss. Mommy does have a job.
Right.
But we're talking to Mr. Also affectionately known as the Mayor of Capitol Hill, Mr. Mike McQuarrie, Mr. Communicator in Chief. How you doing, Mike?
How you doing, Karen?
What other names does he have?
Good to see you.
Mayor DC Newt 90, a.k.a. Mr. The Usual Suspect, a.k.a. the Mayor of Capitol Hill, a.k.a. I don't know what you're doing with your hair right now, but yeah. Oh, and then lean in too. But sitting in between us, we have a super special guest audience. Superstar.
Hey.
Super duper star. This is for this season, period, for the podcast this year.
Ever.
This is our first
That's
ever
what I
member
do.
of
I'm the
Congress.
first.
The first, exactly. First member of Congress. We have Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, delegate from the U.S. Virgin Islands.
That's right.
Hi,
Hey.
Congresswoman. How are you
How
doing?
you guys?
Congresswoman,
How's
how you
everyone?
doing today? I've seen you
All
day
day.
Well, this is my first time seeing you,
I'm
and
gonna
I am
be talking to
and
you,
I'm super.
Cameron.
I am super honored.
And you're in between us and drinks, so
yeah.
let's make it quick.
This is going to be a special edition. Like we're recording live here with Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett. Thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Thanks for allowing me to be the first.
Right.
Yes.
So I set the trend.
You
here, right?
You're setting
All
the
right.
trend for
Bar is
members
set
of
very
Congress.
high.
We've talked to a few other elected officials and politicals, but you are our first member of Congress, and so
Okay.
we thank you. And thank you for sitting here and talking with us to the hip hop generation. As I mentioned, the whole point of the podcast is to kind of demystify the political process and connect the hip hop generation to the political process. You asked me a very key question: who is the hip hop generation? I said that's 16 to 60 because Dr. Dre is almost 60 and Lil Pump is 15.
Why do you think Dr. Dre is like the beginning of that's to me?
No,
not
if
the
you want to go to
beginning.
Fab Five Freddy, if
Oh,
you want to
that's-
go
that's okay. We could go there. I can go a little further back.
Go
than
further
that.
back for us. Tell us who.
Melly
Oh.
Mel.
I could go further back than that.
Let her answer.
I mean, the first time I heard rap was 1976
Oh wow. Who
on the
was that?
bus. Eddie Chiba
Oh wow. In New York, right?
in New York.
You grew up
Yeah,
in New York?
Brooklyn.
Okay.
Brooklyn.
Okay. I
So
gotta do my
Eddie,
research.
they was in the back of the bus. You know, I wasn't sitting in the back of the bus.
Right.
I wasn't allowed to sit in the
Clarification.
back of the bus. But,
96.
you know, I would look back at the interesting people that were sitting in the back of the bus. There was a guy had a boombox on and he was playing Eddie Chiba.
Wow. Oh, so your love and connection to hip hop goes back.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, my family's from the Caribbean.
Okay.
Rap music is Caribbean music.
It is.
It all started with us in the Bronx and in Brooklyn, trying to hype up the crowd, get things going, talk about people, selectors, right?
Yeah.
So there you go.
Okay. Well, so you gave us a little bit of your history with with hip hop and with the generation, and you mentioned you grew up in New York. Can you explain to us what sparked you to get into public office? Coming from New York,
Right.
I've read your bio. I'm
Yeah.
familiar with your work, but
You know, my family has always been in politics. We were not elected people to politics. You know, it's interesting now being the person who's elected because my family always felt that those were not the smart people. That, you know, it's the people sitting on the couch with the notepad telling the politician what to do, the person organizing and strategizing. Those were the ones that were really setting policy. My uncles, one came back from college and one came back from Vietnam. This is the beginning of Vietnam, and came back to the Virgin Islands to organize unions. And that was really kind of the introduction to my family of really being engaged in politics, really seeing it as a mechanism to move policy and economic development and growth of yourself. But my parents lived in New York. They were older siblings that were sent to New York to send money back home. But the Virgin Islands was always considered home, even though we were living in New York, and kept that connection. Always had a heart for public service and have always done that, you know, whether coming out of law school, working as a prosecutor in New York, coming back here to Washington, working on the Hill as a staffer, being involved at the Justice Department in a political position right after September 11th. And then when I went back home to the Virgin Islands, I thought I was going to go there to relax.
Beach
I have
time.
no. I was going to write a book. I've got 3 chapters done.
Oh, you have 3 chapters now?
Three chapters from a book that I started in 2005. Haven't gotten around to the rest of it because I got engaged, you know, got married, my second marriage to my husband, who was already very engaged in politics. And he was basically the person who got tired of me talking about what other people weren't doing and told me just put up or shut up. And so I had to run.
Oh, and
What was your first hip hop concert you went to, and how was it? Did you sneak in or you buy a ticket?
So, you know, I didn't go to a concert like you guys go to concerts. My first hip hop experience was on Sedgwick Avenue in the Bronx in the early 80s. It was a friend had an index card to a party that was going to be at a community center in one of the projects up there. And we went up there, and that's how I got introduced to hip hop.
Oh, wow.
So how about that?
It's interesting.
This
We're gonna put that in your bio.
This was back when, you know, people were still battling over equipment and stuff, and
Carrying in crates.
yeah, carrying in crates. And I had a cousin who lived with us. My parents, you know, were always complaining because not only did he have the records, you know, would get the disco versions of the records to scratch on, but did you know if you put the 45, what's that middle size, the heavier one?
No,
Not the 45. There's one that's in between that.
No, there's the 45,
Right.
and then there's the, what's it, 60?
But there's one that's a little heavier.
I'm
And
too
if
young
you
to know
and
all
if you glue that one to the disco version, it gives it a little weight. So when you spin it back, it doesn't flip as far back as you need it. So it can go just a little slower.
Have you
I
DJed
was
before
saying she
too?
used to be a DJ in our-
Did you used to be a DJ
No.
in college? Or?
No.
You just know a little bit.
I just, you know, I watch and learn.
Well, as a person who's watched and learned, and as a elected member of Congress, and obviously you're very entrenched in the political process, but I also clearly you're very entrenched in the hip hop culture, both the history and the present. One of the prospects of hip hop and of hip politics is that hip hop is the largest genre culturally, musically, one of the most impactful cultures in the world. And we really believe, like, to get a lot of this political change that we may need to really get social justice and social action and to get some of the changes in our communities, that we really need to involve and engage both the hip-hop community, hip-hop artists, and hip-hop generation. What do you think I would say, not just the generation of people, but actually the hip-hop artists and the hip-hop community could do to really get involved in the political process, really get involved in helping move legislation, really get
Sure.
involved in that?
You know, I think that there are some who are engaged in that. I wish more were. I wish that they would be more organized about it. Picking 1 or 2 topics, 2 or 3 issues that are premier to the community and to the individuals that they feel they represent, and really work as a focus group to support that, whether it's through their music, through their money, through their influence with other people who are listening to their music. Think about the civil rights movement,
Aretha
right?
Franklin.
It would not have gone as far if it weren't for people like, you know, Harry Belafonte
Aretha
and
Franklin.
others, Aretha Franklin, other artists who were willing to give their time, really put themselves on the line, put their reputations out there about what they believed, and really supporting the people who were on the front lines. I mean, it would mean so much to us as members of Congress, particularly some of the younger members, if we had artists to be able to call on to bring our message out, you know, to say the things that we're doing, to influence people to register to vote, not just to register to vote, but to actually vote in the next election. That would be enormous. That would change the dynamic of our country.
Yeah, that's one of the big things we're focused on, is to get that education to the hip hop community, both on the artist side and the consumer and the fan side, and
Sure.
then also that mobilization.
Sure.
That's kind of our,
And it's not just about having a concert 3 weeks before an election. It's about being engaged 2 years, 3 years before the election, going out there, putting your name on events and issues, letting people know. I mean, what was it? I don't remember when was it, Mike, that Taraji Henson came up to the Hill.
Oh, about 4 months ago.
right? So she came up, she lent her name to an issue that was important to her, depression and mental illness in young people. That was tremendous to have somebody of her stature here talking to members of Congress, because we listen to people like artists who have followings, who are passionate as artists about the things that they are talking about.
Well, we have one rapid fire question, something we
Okay.
have to get on the, we have to get,
Okay, what is
hope
it?
you've been thinking about this. This is something we ask all of our guests. Top 5 dead or alive. So
Hip-hop
that's
artists.
your
Dead or
hip-hop-
alive.
Hip-hop,
Okay.
hip-hop
Start with
artists,
5.
that's to you.
Start with 5 to 1.
Okay. Oh, well, I can't put them in order. I got to
You
put
don't have
them
to
in
put
order.
them in order. He's putting too much pressure on
Yeah,
you.
you
could just
see,
say 5.
He's trying to get back at his boss.
It's after hours, yes.
Okay, number 1 for me is Biggie.
Okay, we agree
Okay,
there.
that's the number 1. You gotta talk about the lyrics of Nas,
Okay.
his wordsmith.
Nasir Jones, okay.
Yeah. I'm a Remy. I always go with Remy.
Oh, is that the
It's
New
just
York
hardcore.
connection?
She's a
That's a new
queen.
twist.
She does not, cut cards with people. She tells it like it is.
She was in
She's
court
got her
today looking
truth.
very nice, though.
Did she
And
look
she-
good?
And she's been reinventing herself. And
Sure,
doing a lot
and you should
more.
be able to do that.
Yeah.
Things bring you down, but you still rise up. Still got something to say. I respect her game.
That's a good 3. 2 more.
Oh, whoo. As a new person, I love Kendrick Lamar.
Okay.
I think he's taken it to a different place. I think you always have to reinvent hip hop, and I appreciate him for the craft that he's bringing to the art. Wow. Oh, can we get back? Give me another question, and I'll give you the last 2.
You have one more.
What's the one more question?
No, you have one more. Wasn't that 4 artists you had? Yeah, you have one more.
Okay.
Well, very last question, and we'll wrap up here. You represent the U.S. Virgin Islands, and to a lot of people, especially in this political climate that we've had, I would just say that I think there's confusion on what a territory is versus what a state. Can you just explain to our audience what it means to represent the U.S. Virgin Islands and how that differs from representing a state?
Sure. So, in 1917, the United States purchased the Virgin Islands from Denmark. Before that, we were called the Danish West Indies. We're several islands, and they purchased us for geopolitical purposes. It was the largest land purchase per acre of anything that the United States has purchased, and that money went to Denmark. That money did not go to the people of the Virgin Islands. And that should begin to tell you the kind of relationship that we have with this country, that, they entered into agreement with another country to purchase us. And it took several, maybe 10, 15 years before we then became United States citizen and had our rights. Our ancestors, when they became citizens, fought to ensure that we would be part of the draft, because Virgin Islanders wanted the responsibility along with the benefits of being an American. But there are a lot of things that we still don't have. We don't vote for president, even though we are part of the draft, even though we have one of the highest per capita deaths in the armed services, because most of our people do what they're supposed to do when called upon by this country. We do not have a full vote in the U.S. House of Representatives. We're much like D.C., where we have someone who's here, I'm here, I vote in committee, I sit on committees, I gain seniority, but when there are bills that are related to the people of the Virgin Islands, to my constituents, I can't vote on it. I can only try and get support from other members related to those things.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you very much. Well, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Okay, so don't you want my other 2?
Oh, you
my
only
other
had
2?
one person.
Oh, I had one more? Oh,
You didn't
damn.
say Jay-Z?
Well,
Nah.
Andre 3000?
Oh, wow.
Nah.
But then, you say Andre 3000, don't you have to bring Big Boy with him?
Now, you know who I would say, and I know it's going to sound like, why him? I'd say Busta.
That's a good one. Busta is
Now here's why. Because Busta Rhymes there's a strength that comes across in his lyrics, but still the ability of him to be as lyrical and utilize his mouth as an instrument the way he does is bar none.
And to
Maybe
your-
ludicrous.
Yeah, I would say, and
Maybe
actually
Luda.
something that they both have in common. But to Busta's, in addition to that, he's one of the most creative visual artists ever. His put your hands where my eyes can see. Some of his videos are groundbreaking to this day. So, and then I'm a huge fan of his lyrics. He can switch his flow up. He's had some content. He's had some fun.
Yes,
a little bit of turn up, and he's lasted the test of time. So that's a good one.
You know,
It
he's
feels
a true Caribbean man, you know.
Oh, okay.
He's strong. He could still bring, you know, have a little fun with you, change it up a little bit. That's how we like him.
And fight.
And fight. Yeah, listen, if you with me, I can't be worried about you when we go into a crazy kind of place. I got to make sure you can handle yourself. You got some hands, right?
I agree. Well, Congresswoman Plaskett, thank you so much for
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thanks,
being on.
Cameron.
Congresswoman.
Thank you.
Nope.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having
Hey,
me. Well, thank you to
Capital
our
Hill.
first member of Congress. This is Cameron Trimble, aka
Michael
Mr.
McQuarrie.
Politics. Michael McQuarrie signing off, and we're out.
And the peanut gallery in the back.
And we're out. Another
Till next
episode.
week, everybody.
Till next week. Peace.